Anandamayi Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parameyi Satyamayi Parameyi Satyamayi Parameyi Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda. So Satprem makes a statement that of all species, man is the most unhappy species because, can you guess why he says that? Because it's the only species which lives thinking it is not what it is. For example, a dog doesn't have mental thoughts, so it won't think I'm this or that or whatever else, nor will a bird, nor will an insect. But a man has a mind, and the mind always makes a narrative, a sort of belief structure about who we are, what life is, and we believe that narrative and belief structure blindly. And very often, for most of us, that narrative is agitating, for most of us, most of the times. So, the topic today is human suffering, its cause and cure. And there's a brilliant Yoga Sutra of Rishi Patanjali which lists 5 causes of human suffering. It's Sutra 2.3, and it says the 5 causes of human suffering are avidya, asmita, rag, dvesh, abhinivesh, 5. So we'll look at each one because 5 causes of human suffering, and we look at what each one is. So let's take the first one, avidya. Avidya is spiritual ignorance, which means I'm all the time thinking I am something that I'm not. What do I think I am really? The voice in my head, right? My voice in my head is constantly talking and convincing me about myself. Yeah? But all the great masters of spirituality will tell you that you are not your thoughts. That thoughts are a very small part of the totality that you are. But in thinking that I am this voice in my head and that I am my thought, that is the primary ignorance or avidya. So let's read in the words of the masters. These are Raman Maharishi's words. It is false to speak of realization. What is there to realize? The real is as it is always. We are not creating anything new or achieving something which we did not have before. The illustration given in the books is this: we dig a well and create a huge pit. The space in the pit or well has not been created by us. We have just removed the earth which was filling the space there. The space was there then and is also there now. So similarly, we have to simply throw out all the age-old long sanskaras which are inside us. When all of them have been given up, the self alone will shine. So what is Maharishi saying? He's saying that we dig a well by pulling out the mud, but the well was always there as space. You took out the mud and the space showed itself. So that space is our real self, the truth that we are beyond our thoughts. Thoughts actually cover up the truth that we are, just the way the mud in the pit covers up the well that already exists there. You didn't create a well, you just removed the obstructions that prevented it from being what it is, right? So those obstructions which make the well invisible to us are the kleshas in Patanjali's language, or the causes of human suffering. So this is Savitri, page 443. The mind's light hides from thee the eternal's thought. The mind's light is our constant thinking. So your thoughts hide from you what's the real truth. The mind's light hides from thee the eternal's thought. Thy mind's light hides from thee the eternal's thought. Thy heart's hopes hide from thee the eternal's will. So there is a will in the providence of scheme. In Savitri there's also a line, whether it seem good or evil to men's eyes, only for good the secret will can work. So this divine will is constantly making things happen. But our heart's hopes, our passions, our desires that it should go only this way, it should not go that way, that hides from us the eternal's will. Earth's joy shut from thee the immortal's bliss. So look at his play of words. It's joys and bliss. Earth's joys hide from thee the immortal's bliss. So we've covered this before, that mother says that the vibration of pleasure is one and the vibration of ananda is one, bliss is one, and both can't coexist. When desire is fulfilled, you experience pleasure. But ananda is something very different, maybe which we've experienced few times in our lives, but in an unforgettable way. Maybe when you're out in nature, maybe when you've been in a very special place, that's ananda. So Sri Aurobindo is saying here, earth's joy shut from thee the immortal's bliss. Thence rose the need of a dark, intruding God, the world's dread teacher, the creator, pain. Where ignorance is, there suffering too must come. The master line of Savitri. There are many master lines, but this is one of them. Where ignorance is, there suffering too must come. Where there's avidya, there you will suffer. There kleshas will come. In Patanjali's language, klesha is the cause of suffering. So in whatever pockets you're ignorant, their life will send you suffering to wake you up, to take you to vidya. Where ignorance is, their suffering too must come. Thy grief is a cry of darkness to light. So I'm reading these lines of Savitri again. Thy mind's light hides from thee the eternal's thought. Thy heart's hopes hide from thee the eternal's will. Earth's joys shut from thee the immortal's bliss. Thence rose the need of a dark, intruding God, the world's dread teacher, the creator, pain. Where ignorance is, there suffering too must come. Thy grief is a cry of darkness to the light. Now, these are words of Eckhart Tolle from New Earth. He says, the truth is inseparable from who you are. So, we are not living the truth because our thoughts are not the truth, but the truth is inseparable from who you are. Jesus speaks of the innermost I am, the essence identity of every man and woman, every life form in fact. He speaks of the life that you are. Some Christian mystics have called it the Christ within. Buddhists call it your Buddha nature. For Hindus, it's Atma. For Mother and Sri Aurobindo, it's the psychic being. I'm adding that. It's not in the text. When you are in touch with that dimension within yourself, and being in touch with it is your natural state, not some miraculous achievement, all your actions and relationships will reflect the oneness with all life that you sense deep within. So when you're in touch with this essence within you, all your actions and relationships will reflect the oneness with all life that you sense deep within. This is love. This oneness with all life is love. Laws, commandments, rules, and regulations are necessary for those who are cut off from who they are, the truth within. They prevent the worst excesses of the ego, and often they don't even do that. Love and do what you will, said Saint Augustine. Words cannot get much closer to the truth than that. So basically, to come back, get the thread back, we said we are exploring the 5 causes of human suffering that Rishi Patanjali has listed in his Yoga Sutras. The first is avidya, ignorance, not knowing who you are and believing your mind when it tells you who you are. That's the fundamental ignorance. To think that you are the voice in your head and to be completely identified with that voice is ignorance or avidya. Now this is from Synthesis of Yoga, Sri Aurobindo. There must be a constant insistence on one main idea, the self-surrender to the master of our being, God within us and in the world, the Supreme Self, the Universal Spirit. The buddhi dwelling always in this master idea must discourage all its own lesser insistences and preferences and teach the whole being that the ego, whether it puts forth its claim through the reason, the personal will, the heart, or the desire soul in the prana, has no just claim of any kind, and all grief, revolt, impatience, trouble is a violence against the master of our being. So what Sri Aurobindo is saying is that we all have a voice in our head which we call our thoughts. We are conscious of that. And we are so conscious of that that we are not conscious of what's behind that voice. So behind that voice there is what masters call a consciousness beyond thought. And that consciousness beyond thought is the realm of God that everything is. Now, that consciousness beyond thought is really the master of our being. Like each of us is a becoming of that one essence. And that one essence remains the master of the becoming also. So he says when you're really in surrender to the master of the being, you fully know that that background intelligence, which is omniscient, it knows everything, and omnipotent, it's all powerful and all loving. So that intelligence which is all loving, all powerful, all seeing, is from behind the veil pulling the strings of all existence. We don't know that. We think we are doing it, but So beautifully the scriptures tell us that not even a leaf falls from the tree to the floor, to the ground, without that will sanctioning it. Now Sri Aurobindo gives us one way of being in surrender to this intelligence. When you're in surrender to this intelligence, whatever happens, somewhere there is a Shraddha. And Shraddha is so, Sanskrit, such a beautiful language. Shraddha is made up of two root words. Shrat is truth and Dha is holding on to. So holding on to this truth that you know in your deepest. So faith, Sri Aurobindo says, is not a belief. It's a knowing of your deepest self. Yeah? He says it's what the seer within you knows to be true even in the absence of external evidence. So when you hold on to this knowing inside you, this knowing of the truth, that is faith, Shraddha. So if you have this Shraddha, then whatever happens, you're patient. It brings you saburi. Shraddha and saburi, you don't say, why did this happen? It shouldn't go this way. I'd have been so much better off if it had gone that way. It brings you infinite patience to know that if it has come, it needs to come in the larger scheme of things. And everything so surrender is not about surrendering one aspect of your life. The real surrender is moment to moment. Surrender is really a state of being. When anything that comes, you're so anchored in the faith that it has come by a higher sanction, and even if it gives me pain, it's come for my highest good. You're so anchored in that there is no revolt, no rebellion, no fight. Not an easy state, but we can keep it as an ideal. Sri Aurobindo's words again, a greater perfection can only be arrived at by a higher power entering in and taking up the whole action of the being. So when we really soften and fall back into surrender, this background intelligence, which is really us, comes forward and all the action is done. The second stage of this yoga will therefore be a persistent giving up of all the action of the nature into the hands of this greater power, a substitution of its influence, possession and working for the personal effort, until the divine to whom we aspire becomes the direct master of the yoga and affects the entire spiritual and ideal conversion of the being. There is one kind of faith demanded as indispensable by the integral yoga, and that may be described as faith in the presence and power of the divine in us and the world. A faith that all in the world is a working of one divine Shakti. I'm repeating. A faith that all in the world is the working of one divine Shakti. That all the steps of the yoga, its strivings and sufferings and failures, as well as its successes and satisfactions and victories, are utilities and necessities of her workings, and that by a firm and strong dependence on and a total surrender to the divine and to his Shakti in us, we can attain to oneness and freedom and victory and perfection. So now these are Toll's words. The word I embodies the greatest error and the deepest truth, depending on how it is used. In conventional usage, it is not only one of the most frequently used words in the language, together with the related words me, my, mine, myself, but also one of the most misleading. In normal everyday usage, I embodies the primordial error. a misperception of who you are, an illusory sense of identity. This is the ego. The illusory sense of self is what Albert Einstein, who had deep insights not only into the reality of space and time but also into human nature, referred to as an optical illusion of consciousness. We all know what optical illusions are, right? Something we see with our eyes but it's not there. Yeah, like a mirage is an optical illusion. So Einstein says that your ego, your sense of ego is not arrogance. You know, we use it loosely, like don't be so egoistic, don't be so arrogant. You could be very humble but you could have a big ego. So ego is basically your sense of I, okay? Humility also could be your ego. I'm such a humble person. If that becomes your identity, that's your ego. So ego is anything which gives you a sense of I separate from the rest. So Sanskrit has the most beautiful word for it. It's called ahankar. It's a sandhi of two words, aham. Aham means I, and akar, form. So that background consciousness, that consciousness beyond mind, it's anchored in the sense of I am, aham. It's the Shuddh aham. But when that aham takes the form of I am this or I am that, it's ahankar. It's the akar the aham takes. And enlightenment is about moving from ahankar to Shuddh aham. Aham will be there because you exist and you can never stop existing. You're eternal. So anything that eternal is eternal existence. It's Sat, it's Chit. So that is aham. That's a sense of I am. So I remember once when my Vedanta teacher was taking a session here and I had invited some children here. There was one boy and he got it so beautifully. My Vedanta teacher Partho was very systematically proving to the kids that everything they were thinking was constructs of their mind, not real. So then this boy opened his eyes and he said that means the only thing that I can be sure of is that I am. It's as simple as that, right? Everything else you don't know, your mind is making it up. The only thing you can be, the only truth that you can say is 100% truth is that you are, I am. That I amness is aham. But the distortion or the optical illusion sets in when thoughts kick in and tell you I am this, I am that, I am whatever, whatever, whatever. So that is your ego. So Albert Einstein called it an optical illusion of consciousness. That illusory self then becomes the basis for all further interpretations, or rather misinterpretations of reality, all thought processes, interactions and relationships. Your reality becomes a reflection of the original illusion. That means that primordial optical illusion of I creates a universal optical illusion. So whatever your sense of I fundamentally is, so some of us have a sense of I which constantly has a background of I'm never important, people always sideline me. That's the fundamental optical illusion. So you will see that in most relationships, even where you're not being sidelined or where it's nothing personal, the ego will interpret the whole world through that first primordial optical illusion that it is. Are you all with me? The good news is, if you can recognize illusion as illusion, it dissolves. The recognition of illusion is also its ending. Its survival depends on your mistaking it for reality. In seeing who you are not, the reality of who you are emerges by itself. So the first klesha, the first cause of human suffering is the ego, is the mistaken identity, avidya, which makes you think that you are the voice in your head. The second klesha, Patanjali says, is asmita. Asmi is like I am. Like in Sanskrit, if I want to say I am Anahita, I'll say aham Anahita asmi. So asmita, ta is like an abstract noun, like mamata, motherness. Yeah, ta is like that. So asmita is I amness, if you loosely translate it into English. So from avidya, which is the mother of all kleshas, avidya is the mother of all other sufferings. The first offspring of avidya is asmita, I amness, I am separate from the others. So these are Toll's words. Complaining is one of the ego's favorite strategies for strengthening itself. Every complaint is a little story the mind makes up that you completely believe in. Whether you complain aloud or only in thought makes no difference. Some egos that perhaps don't have much else to identify with easily survive on complaining alone. So the ego needs to survive on something, and what it loves to survive on is complaining. When you're in the grip of such an ego, complaining, especially about other people, is habitual and of course unconscious, which means you don't know what you're doing. Whatever behavior the ego manifests, the hidden motivating force is always the same: the need to stand out, be special, be in control, the need for power, for attention, for more, and of course the need to feel a sense of separation, and that is to say the need for opposition, enemies. So the ego survives on creating enemies because it needs to create artificial boundaries, right? Much like the world at large, if you look at Earth, landmass is one continuous globe. On our atlas, we've created boundaries, but Earth is not divided, right? The same river flows as Sangpo in Tibet and Brahmaputra in India. You call it a different name. You say it's crossed a boundary, but there's no boundary on land. It's man-made. So what we've done to the earth at a micro level, we've done to ourselves. We've created a boundary. Here's me, here's you, here's you, here's you. So, and of course, so the ego, to maintain, now the nations also, to maintain the boundaries, they have to create enemies, right? We see that. I mean, just now we are seeing that more than ever before. And in our Vedas, there's a beautiful saying, Yatha Brahmande Tatha Pinde. As is the larger universe, Brahmand, macrocosm, so is the Pinda, the smaller universe, the microcosm. So the more divided we are in our consciousness individually, the more that manifests as global division, because the outside is always a reflection of our inside. So the ego always wants to stand out, be special, be in control. Do you recognize this? Our ego gets hurt when somebody else is more special to someone than us, when somebody else is more in control, when somebody else is getting more attention. Our ego reacts, and that reaction sees enemies in people who are not giving the ego its food. Do you see this whole mechanism? But actually they are not enemies, they are just being who they are, and your ego is interpreting that their behavior is threatening to you. Okay, so that is the sense of I, or asmita. So which are the two kleshas we've covered so far? Vidya and asmita. Now we come to rag. Rag is simply attachment to the pleasant. Now, the great people, the great minds never say no to enjoyment. The world is meant to be enjoyed. But the problem comes when what we enjoy we get attached to and we want it to keep repeating. And it will never repeat, because right down to the atomic, subnuclear, quantum level, nothing in this universe is constant. It's constantly changing. You never step into the same river twice. So if you don't step into the same river twice, how do you expect to touch the same pleasant water you touched once? You can't. By the time you step into the river again, the water has flown past. So to be attached to an object of pleasure, according to Patanjali, that's a cause of suffering. So that is rag. Okay, these are Toll's words again. When I was seeing people as a counselor and spiritual teacher, I would visit a woman twice a week whose body was riddled with cancer. She was a school teacher in her mid-40s and had been given no more than a few months to live by her doctors. One day, however, I arrived to find her in a state of great distress and anger. What happened? I asked. Her diamond ring of great monetary as well as sentimental value had disappeared, and she said she was sure it had been stolen by the woman who came to look after her for a few hours every day. She said she didn't understand how anybody could be so callous and heartless as to do this to her. She asked me whether she should confront the woman or whether it would be better to call the police immediately. I said I couldn't tell her what to do, but asked her to find out how important a ring or anything else was at this point in her life. She had cancer. She was going to die any time. You don't understand, she said. This was my grandmother's ring. I used to wear it every day until I got ill and my hands became too swollen. It's more than just a ring to me. How can I not be upset? The quickness of her response and the anger and defensiveness in her voice were indications that she had not yet become present enough to look within and to disentangle her reaction from the event and observe them both. Her anger and defensiveness were signs that the ego was still speaking through her. Whenever we are angry and defensive, the ego is speaking through us. I'm not saying anger and defensiveness is wrong, but it's good to recognize that, this is my ego speaking. I said, Toll said, I'm going to ask you a few questions. But instead of answering them now, see if you can find the answers within you. I will pause briefly after each question. When an answer comes, it may not necessarily come in the form of words. She said she was ready to listen. I asked, do you realize that you will have to let go of the ring at some point, perhaps quite soon, because she is poised to die? How much more time do you need before you will be ready to let go of it? Will you become less when you let go of it? Has who you are become diminished by the loss? There were a few minutes of silence after the last question. When she started speaking again, there was a smile on her face and she seemed at peace. The last question made me realize something important. First, I went to my mind for an answer and my mind said, yes, of course you've been diminished, you've been robbed. Then I asked myself the question again, has who I am become diminished? This time I tried to feel rather than think the answer. And suddenly I could feel my I amness. I have never felt that before. If I can feel the I am so strongly, then who I am hasn't been diminished at all. I can still feel it now, something peaceful but very alive. That is the joy of being. So let's pause here and understand. So this lady had lost her ring and she was all upset and angry and extrapolated to something you've lost, a relationship, valuables, image in somebody's mind, whatever, and it makes you angry and you feel very, very justified in your anger, and at one level you are, but we are not talking about right and wrong. We are talking about conscious and unconscious, and anger is always unconscious. You can't be conscious and be angry. Do you understand what I'm saying? Any questions? So this lady was full of, okay, let's also define unconscious. Total identification with the voice in your head is unconsciousness. Yeah? When you're totally identified with what your thoughts are telling you, you've become unconscious. The moment you can step back and be a little separate from your thoughts, that's when consciousness is claiming you and arising again. So you can't get angry and be conscious. So this lady was in a state of unconsciousness, and then Toll asked her, has the loss of this ring really diminished you in any way? And first her mind said, of course it has. I had an emotional connect with it. It was my grandfather's, blah, blah, blah. But then she said, instead of thinking, I sat to feel. I'm feeling my consciousness, my being. Has the loss of the ring diminished me in any way? And the answer was no. And actually nothing can diminish you in any way if you really identify yourself as consciousness. If you identify yourself as this mind-body complex, everything can diminish you. But that's not who you really are. You are the consciousness and awareness in which this mind-body complex is arising. And in the Gita, it's so beautifully said that you are that which no fire can burn, no water can wet, no sword can cleave, no words can wound you, no betrayal can make you less, no criticism and slander can diminish you. And that is truth, because the only thing that hurts in you is your sense of I, your ego. And the ego is nothing but a mental construct, it's a phantom. So a phantom hurting is nobody hurting actually. The real you can never be hurt. Yeah? So this lady smiled and said, yeah, I realize that the I am that I am space of me has not been diminished. It cannot be diminished. That is the joy of being, I said. Toll says, you can only feel it when you get out of your head. Being must be felt. It can't be thought. The ego doesn't know about it because thought is what it consists of. The ring was really in your head as a thought that you confused with the sense of I am. You thought the I am or a part of it was in the ring. When her mother called me, Toll speaking again, when this lady's mother called him, when her mother called me to let me know she had passed away, she also mentioned that after her death, they found a ring in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. Did the woman return the ring, the person, or had it been there all along? Nobody will ever know. One thing we do know, life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. How do you know this is the experience you need? Because this is the experience you're having at the moment. So beautiful, no? We don't know who took the ring, but we know that it was whether it seem good or evil to men's eyes, only for good the secret will can work. The secret will had planned all this to give her this experience before she moved on. So, to own something, what does it really mean? What does it mean to make something mine? If you stand on a street in New York pointing to a huge skyscraper and said, "That building is mine, I own it," you are either very wealthy or you're delusional or you're a liar. In any case, you're telling a story in which the thought form I and the thought form building merge into one. That's how the mental concept of ownership works. If everybody agrees with your story, there'll be signed pieces of paper to certify their agreement with it. You're wealthy. If nobody agrees with the story, they'll send you to a psychiatrist. You're delusional or a compulsive liar. It is important to recognize here that the story and the thought forms that make up the story, whether people agree with it or not, have absolutely nothing to do with who you are. So, if I say this bangle is mine and all of you agree that it's mine, I'm sane. But if you disagree that it's mine, I'm delusional. But actually, is this bangle really mine? I paid some money and bought it at a store. But was this bangle non-existent before it came on my hand? It belonged to the store owner, right? Before that, it was a metallic ore. Before that, it was buried in the earth. At some point, I'll discard it. It'll go back to the earth or whatever. So it can't be mine, no? If something is mine, it should be mine forever. It should be me. So because we've come to an agreement that if I pay a certain cash amount for the bangle, it's mine, I call it mine. But does it really become mine? Think about it for your friend, partner, spouse, parents. It's an agreement among human beings that if you sign this paper and say I do or whatever, he's my husband. But it's just an arrangement among human beings, no? And then I feel he's mine. But was he mine before I met him? Will he be mine when we part in this birth or other births? It's just an agreement and everyone says yes, so I call him my husband or my friend or my daughter. But really nothing is ours. And if you really get that, you'll be liberated. It's of course very difficult to get that. Every object, every person only belongs to the energy that it is, the energy of God. Nothing belongs to us. So I keep coming back to this gem from Isha Upanishad where it says, Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat. The Lord is inhabiting everything, in every world, in the atomic world, in the quantum world, everywhere it's only God. Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjita. Enjoy everything by renouncing attachment and possessiveness. Ma gridha kasya svidhanam. Why are you coveting wealth that's not yours? Whenever you call anything mine, you're coveting wealth which is not yours. All wealth, human wealth, relationship wealth, object wealth, it only belongs to the divine that has manifested as that object or human being. And the moment we try to possess it, we are creating pain for ourselves and others. And if you're a third person to the pain you're creating, you'll find yourself quite insane. My friend, why should she talk to somebody else? Arey, but how, I mean, does she not belong to the whole universe also? Is she only yours? Are you going to lock her up in a cupboard? Can you lock her up in a cupboard? Or anything else, anything you're trying to possess, it's going to give you pain because it's designed to slip out of your fingers while you're trying to possess it. So that's what toll is pointing to. Whether people agree with it or not have absolutely nothing to do with who you are. Even if people agree with it, it is ultimately a fiction. Many people don't realize until they are on their deathbed and everything external falls away that nothing ever had anything to do with who they are. In the proximity of death, the whole concept of ownership stands revealed as ultimately meaningless. What are you going to take with you when you die? What is the only thing you'll take with you when you die? The breath of God that you were born with, right? That's what Krishna tells Arjuna in the Gita, that when you die, one by one, everything you're calling your own is going to leave you. Even this breath is going to leave you. Only me that has become you will accompany you beyond death and beyond. So that is the only thing we can say is really us and ours. The divine presence, the consciousness. Everything else we are self-claiming, it's only going to give us pain because it's a false claim. And a false claim will always be annulled and be taken away. In the proximity of death, the whole concept of ownership stands revealed as ultimately meaningless. In the last moments of their life, they then also realize that while they were looking throughout their lives for a more complete sense of self, what they were really looking for, their being, had always already been there, but had been largely obscured by their identification with things, which ultimately means identification with their mind. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Jesus said, for theirs will be the kingdom of heaven. What does poor in spirit mean? No inner baggage, no identifications, not with things, nor with any mental concepts that have a sense of self in them. And what is the kingdom of heaven? The simple but profound joy of being that is there when you let go of identifications and so become poor in spirit. So they did a study of people who were terminally ill and they were going to die very soon. And they asked them, if you could relive your life, what would you change? And many of the psychiatrists and all expected the answer to be, oh, I've had such a miserable life. I wish people had loved me more. I wish they had shown me more care. But majority didn't say that. Majority said, I wish I had loved more. Because when you're about to transition and as your outer form starts diminishing, the essence comes forward. And the essence of each of us is love and oneness. So the desire of that essence is not to be loved, but to love, to feel oneness, to feel a connection. But the question is, why should we wait till the last few moments before coming to this realization? Beautifully said in the Gita that live your life as if you're poised in that one moment before you die. If in that one moment before you die something won't be that important, don't give it that much importance now. Somebody close to you has done something which your ego is reacting to. Ask yourself, if I was poised in that one moment before I die, how would I deal with it? Would I forgive, or would I want revenge and a quarrel and whatever? And don't leave it to that last moment to say, I wish I had loved more. Live your life with this mantra that at every moment that I can, let me seize it to love more. Okay, so we've covered the first 3 kleshas, which are avidya, asmita, rag. Avidya, spiritual ignorance; asmita, sense of I; rag, what is rag? Attachment to pleasure. Now we come to the 4th, which is dvesh. Dvesh is aversion to pain. So we'll say it's normal to avoid pain, right? Why is it called an affliction of the human consciousness? Why is it a cause of suffering? Because we read those lines in Savitri where it was said that wherever there is ignorance, there suffering too must come. So if pain comes, it comes to us to redeem us of some ignorance which we won't let go of till pain shakes us up. Like in the story of the ring, the lady went through a lot of pain at the thought of the loss of her ring. But the whole occurrence happened to bring her out of one pocket of ignorance that she was in, right? So everything painful is a wake-up call for us. So if I'm wise, I'll always ask, what can I learn from this pain? And I won't go crazy trying to push the pain away. When pain comes, I want to push it away at all cost. I'll try to suppress it. I'll try to distract myself. But can I sit patiently with the pain? Can I just say, okay, you've come. It's not pleasant, but it's not bad that you've come. Can I actually tell pain that it doesn't feel good, but it's not bad that you've come. You've come to teach me something. I'm going to sit with you and learn what you've to teach me. But dvesh is aversion. Dvesh doesn't allow for any space to be patient with pain, right? So resentment means to feel bitter, indignant, aggrieved or offended. You resent other people's greed, their dishonesty, their lack of integrity, what they are doing, what they did in the past, what they said, what they failed to do, what they should do or shouldn't have done. Rings a bell for all of us, right? You should have done this, you shouldn't have done this, you failed to do this, you said this, you did that. The ego loves it. Instead of overlooking unconsciousness in others, you make it into their identity. Who is doing that? The unconsciousness in you, the ego. Sometimes the fault that you perceive in another isn't even there. It is a total misinterpretation, a projection by a mind conditioned to see enemies and make itself right or superior. Remember what Toll says, the ego survives on making enemies. Have you noticed that you sometimes get into a space where you find yourself ridiculous in how you keep thinking that this one's against me, that one's against me, that one's against me. And a day passes and sanity returns and you say, what was that all about? Nobody was against me. Have you all noticed you fall into windows of unconsciousness like that? That's the time your ego comes up very strongly. Who is doing that? The unconsciousness in you, the ego. Sometimes the fault that you perceive in another isn't even there. It is a total misinterpretation, a projection by a mind conditioned to see enemies and make itself right or superior. At other times, the fault may be there, but by focusing on it sometimes to the exclusion of everything else, you amplify it. And what you react to in another, you strengthen in yourself. This is so beautiful. What you react to in another becomes stronger in yourself because you're giving it energy. And whatever you give energy to becomes stronger in yourself. Rumi says one very beautiful thing. He says when it comes to the fault of others, Be like the night. What does the night do? It covers up cracks and whatever. But the ego is the opposite. It wants to find fault. It wants to declare you're wrong, you did this wrong, you should see it. But the more conscious you are, the more you are like the night. You want to cover the fault of others rather than highlight them. Non-reaction to the ego and others is one of the most effective ways not only of going beyond ego in yourself, but also of dissolving the collective human ego. But you can only be in a state of non-reaction if you can recognize someone's behavior as coming from the ego, as being an expression of the collective human dysfunction. This is very important. See, take this as a metaphor. Say there's a flu epidemic and lots of people are coughing. Now we are sitting in this room and somebody starts coughing loudly. You'll recognize he's caught an illness and he's coughing, and you won't take it personally as he's coughing at me, he's disturbing me, he's purposely doing it. You won't make it personal. So whenever somebody is acting from them ego, he's just got the germ of the collective human dysfunction, which is the ego. So don't make it personal. It's a universal thing. So egos aren't personal, so don't make them personal. Just recognize he's in the grip of an unconscious ego, and it's just that. When you realize that it's not personal, there's no longer a compulsion to react as if it were. By not reacting to the ego, you will often be able to bring out the sanity in others, which is the unconditioned consciousness as opposed to conditioned. At times, you may have to take practical steps to protect yourself from deeply unconscious people. This you can do without making them into enemies, right? You can speak what you have to, but you can say your behavior hurt me, but without hurling accusation, blame, making them wrong. Your greatest protection, however, is being conscious. Somebody becomes an enemy if you personalize the unconsciousness that is the ego. Non-reaction is not weakness but strength. Another word for non-reaction is forgiveness. To forgive is to overlook, or rather to look through. This is a beautiful sentence. To forgive is to overlook, or rather to look through. You look through the ego to the sanity that is in every human being as is or her presence. That sanity is the mother in them or the God in them. You look through the mask to the God presence that each person is, and don't take the mask the person's wearing in that moment very seriously. I know it's difficult, but even if, don't start with big things, but start with little things. Start with people who are not that important in your life. If they nudge you off the wrong way, out of their unconscious egoic patterns, maybe the staff at home, maybe the driver, see if you can really practice this. You don't tango with them. Particularly I see people being very egoistic with their staff because they can be. The staff depends on them for a salary. But it's beautiful when at that time you drop that I am the master, this one's working. We are both, well, in that sense, different aspects of the mother. It starts with treating your staff also as if they too are part of that oneness that life is. and not getting into an ego battle with them, not trying to prove them wrong. Sometimes allow them to win. It's so easy for you to win in a battle of words against your staff, right? But sometimes give them the joy of winning against you. If they are making an unjust demand and it's not pinching you too much to say yes to the demand, say yes. Just to give them the joy of winning and just so that you drop your ego. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Whenever you notice that voice, you will also realize that you are not the voice, that voice in your head, but the one who is aware of it. In fact, you are the awareness that is aware of the voice. In the background, there is the awareness. In the foreground, there is the voice, the thinker. In this way, you're becoming free of the ego, free of the unobserved mind. The moment you become aware of the ego in you, it is strictly speaking no longer the ego, but an old conditioned mind pattern. Ego implies unawareness. Awareness and ego cannot coexist. So what Toll is saying, you have a voice in your head, observe it and don't identify with it. Step back and try to sense the awareness space in which the voice arises. That awareness space is more truly who you are. So we've covered 4 kleshas. They are avidya, asmita, rag, dvesh. And now we come to the 5th and the last one, abhinivesh. Now very simply, Rishi Patanjali says abhinivesh is fear of death. But it's not just fear of physical death. It's fear of the death of anything you value. Do you get it? In a more generic way, it's the fear of impermanence. That things will pass and I'm afraid of letting them change and pass. And that's obviously going to cause me pain because as the Buddha said, everything in the universe is in the realm of anicca, impermanence. Everything is changing. And if you're afraid of that change, of course it's going to be a cause of suffering. Yeah? So, Toll says, as I was walking with a friend through a beautiful nature reserve near Malibu in California, we came upon the ruins of what had once been a country house destroyed by a fire several decades ago. As we approached the property, long overgrown with trees and all kinds of magnificent plants, there was a sign by the side of the trail put there by the park authorities. It read, "Danger, all structures are unstable." There was construction work going on, so all structures are unstable. I said to my friend, that's a profound sutra, sacred scripture. And we stood there in awe. Once you realize and accept that all structures, forms are unstable, even the seemingly solid material ones, peace within you arises. All structures means all structures in relationships, all structures of circumstances. They are unstable, they will change for the better or the worse. And to learn to be okay with it, because it doesn't change randomly. It seems random, but there's a perfect order to the chaos. You know, cosmos comes from the Latin word order. So cosmos seems to be chaotic, but there's perfect order in the chaos. So everything is changing, but to the dictates of a higher will. So don't be afraid of change. It will always lead to something good eventually. So abhinivesha is to fear change in a very generic sense. Once you realize and accept that all structures are unstable, even the seemingly solid material ones, peace arises within you. This is because the recognition of the impermanence of all forms awakens you to a dimension of the formless within yourself, that which is beyond death. Jesus called it eternal life. When you recognize the impermanence of all forms, you become aware of a dimension of the formless within you, the essence, the consciousness beyond mind, which is eternal life. So we've heard all this, but how do we bring this into our life? So we've said that the 5 causes of suffering are avidya, spiritual ignorance, thinking you are the voice in your head and complete identification with it. 2, asmita, the sense of I, being the ego in the head, separate from everyone else. Then rag, attachment to pleasant things and wanting to cling to them, wanting to possess them. Dvesh, aversion to pain. And abhinivesh, fear of change, fear of impermanence. Now, whenever I'm unhappy, see, if I know I have a cold, I'll take the medicine that works for it, right? But if I'm so unconscious of my body that I don't even realize that I have a cold, I can't do anything about it. So whenever there's unhappiness, recognize, oh, this unhappiness is coming from rag, attachment, possessiveness, and remember everything we've discussed, that really you can't possess anything. Really you can enjoy a thing in the moment, but you can't step into the same river twice. You can't expect it to repeat. So don't expect it to repeat. That's attachment to pleasure. Remind yourself, I've fallen unconscious. And dvesh, aversion to pain. When pain comes, I add more pain in trying to avoid the pain. Do you see that? I just want to get rid of that pain at any cost. So if I don't do that, I recognize this is dvesh, but I'm going to sit with the pain. I'm going to teach myself how to be conscious and patient with the pain and learn from it what it's come to teach me. And abhinivesh, fear of things changing. So whenever I catch myself fear of this changing, okay, let's take a concrete example of each of this. Can you give me an example of rag? A painful thought which has its roots in rag. So give me an example. Attachment to junk food, yeah. What else?
When I'm expecting something for dinner and it's not that, then that pleasure I do not get.
Yes.
And then
yes. Or?
Attachment to certain activities. So like when you're younger, you can maybe excel more in sports and physical things, and then as you get older, you lose the ability.
Okay. So attachment to capacity. Yeah. Yeah. What else?
Attachment to just negativity as such. What if you just have negative?
But that's not rag, no, because that would be dvesh. It could also be attachment to expecting a person to behave pleasantly with you today. Tomorrow you meet him, you want that same pleasant behavior repeated. A person who made you feel very special today, next time you meet, you want the person to repeat it. But more often than not, it won't repeat because you never step into the same river twice. So the moment you enjoy something, remind yourself, enjoy it now because it may not repeat. Don't expect it to repeat. Our problem comes when we want it to repeat again and again and again, right? And then dvesh would be aversion to pain, that we've discussed. Or abhinivesh would be fear of change. And there again you remind yourself that change is good, change is evolution. And that I don't have, change is actually the fear of the unknown. But the most beautiful things are left to be discovered in the realm of the unknown, right? We don't need to really fear them. So be conscious. It helps to label a thought. This is a thought of rag. This is a thought of dvesh. This is abhinivesh. And constantly step back and try to hear that voice in your head without, do that now for 2 minutes. Keep your eyes open or shut. It doesn't matter. But just become conscious of your thoughts. And you will see that you're convinced that you are the thoughts. But just let the thoughts go on. Don't add or subtract anything to them. Don't build stories around them. Just watch them as if you're a third person to your thoughts. It'll help to ground yourself in the breath. Watch the breath as if it's the anchor for the practice, and simultaneously watch your thoughts. See if you can become even slightly conscious of the observer of the thought, the subject. Thought is the object. Pay more attention to the subject, the awareness behind thoughts, the observing field. And try to shift your identity from thought to the observer of the thought. That observer is who I really am. Thoughts are just mental constructs, recordings from the past. They are not the truth of who I am. They are just dreams I'm having in a waking state. I can wake up from the dream by stepping back into the awareness field. And in that awareness field, it's an eternal, pleasant dream of bliss. In thought, I oscillate between dreams and nightmares. But when I step out of that, it's an eternity of quiet, happy joy. And slowly, if you've shut your eyes, open your eyes. Could any of you sense the space behind a little bit? Yeah? What does it feel like to sense that space? Yeah?
Silence.
And what happens to your relationship with thought when you sense that space? The thought disappears, or if it continues, how do you perceive it?
It's like I didn't connect myself with the thought. It's like I'm just watching it, but it's not real.
It's not real, and the thoughts don't affect you. Otherwise, thoughts constantly affect you into happiness and unhappiness. But when you touch that awareness, thoughts lose their power to make you happy or unhappy. And that's a great freedom, isn't it? Hmm?
So anything, whatever, it's like any thought comes. So do we need to just put it back into our subconscious that I don't want this thought coming back?
No, no, never do that.
Never do that. Just
Whatever you resist will persist.
so even if it's a bad thought, let it just
You just allow it, but you detach from it. Huh? You can even offer it, yeah. Chalo, any questions? Okay, then we'll end with 3 ohms. Hmm.